Hey guys, and welcome back to another video. So now that we finished the Epiphyllum notebook, sketchbook, whatever you want to call it, I am going to be doing the first page of the new sketchbook or the front cover. And as usual, I'm going to think of something that I want to do for both the front and back. But I'm just going to be illustrating the front page and kind of keeping the back page in my brain just for future reference. So I took a look at a previous sketchbook where I knew I really liked the front and back matching like this. So I found my Stay Comfy sketchbook from Lily Pichu, and I have Gamer Wanu on the front and the back done in gouache. So this is actually the new sketchbook that I decided to start off with, which is the Mental Vacation sketchbook from TrickyWagon, who is an artist that I very much look up to. Yeah, and I really love always their style of sketchbooks, or like kind of wherever to get them manufactured. I always like the paper quality as well as the size, the fact that it lays flat, paper super smooth, a little bit thicker, and I don't know, I think it accepts mediums quite well. And in the past I've done watercolor, I've done graphite, I've done pen drawings, I think I've done alcohol markers on it as well as it's like, it feels very similar to the Lily Pichu one as well. The Lily Pichu one I think is a little bit more toothier paper if I'm not mistaken, but this I am super excited to work on. So I wanted to do a gouache painting again on the cover, and technically this is considered the first page. And I'm drawing my favorite person to draw usually, so which is Wanu. I was gonna say my OC, but this is not my OC. This is Wanu from 17, and I decided to pick an outfit that, or like a general look that I really enjoy, and that is the one from, I believe it's from Fear. So during their Fear promotions, Wanu had more of a kind of like pastel purple lavenderish hair color, and then he had often kind of like side parted hair, kind of more like, is it like almost like a comma hairstyle, except for it's like curly and a little bit wavy. And then for a fan signing, or a lot of their outfits that they did performances in, they were kind of more almost formal-ish. It's very like kind of suits, kind of blazers, kind of that kind of look, and I really like it. So I chose the fan signing photo where Wanu is wearing just the vest and the shirt with the tie, as well as the glasses, instead of wearing like the full-on getup. Yeah, I just think he looks really classy and really cute. Also, just a little bit of softer colors. Now, I showed you guys the sketch. I showed you a little bit of footage from my phone as well, so you guys could see the preliminary sketch done with the Pilot Color ENO and the color pink, I believe this time, not red. And then I did a second sketch on top with pencil so that we could lay our water painting materials on top without losing the sketch. So I'm starting off with watercolor, and I'm blocking in both kind of an indication of the values as well as just majority of like the colors that I want to use. So I decided to go with the concept of just him with a bunch of foliage. I've done several characters like this, but I feel like I just needed something to kind of ease my way in, again with painting with gouache. So when I did the last page for the Epiphyllum sketchbook, I opted to do alcohol markers instead, and I feel like that's a little bit of a mistake. It was a lot quicker than doing gouache, but I think the end result was a little bit you know, subpar, if I can say that. But for this one, I wanted to spend a lot of time because I knew I wanted a certain kind of look. So I wanted to have kind of the lighting to be a little bit different. It's kind of like that scattered lighting when you get from the sunlight peering through like tree leaves and stuff. So I wanted to have a little bit of shadow on his face, as well as on the hair. There's a little bit more of like the scattering light on his, as well as like on his collar and stuff, if that makes sense. We'll get into it a little bit more during the gouache session. Actually, I think we already switched to gouache. I'll put like some pictures of what watercolor looks like up close on this paper. I really like it, and I like how you can layer up and get like really cool texture when it dries, kind of like the hard edge, and then you can fade it out to a softer edge if you would like to. So it's not like watercolor paper, it's still like a smoother, similar to cardstock in a sense, but, or like even like Bristol board kind of paper. But now we are on the gouache painting part, so I will also take some pictures. This is what my kind of gouache palette looks like alongside with my paints. I then later, while the video for which one is it? Actually, no, I think it's like when I was trying to speed up the footage for this. Sometimes it takes a little bit of time to render. So I actually went ahead and tried to mix up water and try to smooth out a little bit of my paints so they're no longer like me digging a hole, because some of them have dried out. As well as I cleaned up my gouache palette so that it was no longer this disgusting mess of colors sporadically everywhere, because I noticed that it's harder for me to get lighter colors or just any consistent amount of paint for light colors using that palette, just because my palette's like entirely covered with more or less like mid-tones to dark tones, and it's just like a whole build-up. So I did my best to kind of scrub away at the whole palette and basically made it all clean again, and I started new because I wanted a place to mix up my skin tones separate and a place for more like pastel colors, because like I said, I wanted Wonu's hair to be more of that pastel purple like it is for the promotions during their Fear album or song promotions. So when I was painting with the gouache, I usually start with the face. It's just easier. Like pretty much every time I color anything, I usually start with the face because I care about the face the most usually, because that's the most fun part for me to draw or paint or color or illustrate. But I did have a little bit of problems. So I actually really like the lighting that I had for the initial pass of the watercolor. I think the shapes and the like the random blobs and splotches of light and stuff looked a little bit more natural. But once I started painting with the gouache and I kind of had a hard time mixing the colors that I wanted to, I lost a lot of that nice scattering light effect, as well as making it look a little less natural, if that makes sense. Everything looks a little bit more intentionally placed, which I didn't really want. So I kind of went back and forth doing like, do I do his hair color first and add in like the lights, or do I add in the light colors and then circle around the light with the darker color? So it's kind of playing around with both. I do like how I did the skin, just because I wanted to have a little bit of that orange or much more of an intense warm color around the edge of the shadow where the light's on his face, or the shadow's on his face, I guess, like the ridges of it. And then I kind of went back and forth from the hair and the clothing, because as I waited for the hair to dry, I decided to work on the clothing and work on the collar and try to figure it out. I've watched like several videos from different people who've done, I think it's more like Ghibli styled paintings, but done in gouache, and a lot of them pick ones that have like a lot of foliage and stuff. So I was watching how they approach painting foliage, and it's very much the same way how I initially painted like my Tea Natty piece with the acrylic paints, where I painted majority of it dark as like the darkest, deepest tone, and then you start layering up by going to more of like a dark mid-tone, then maybe to a mid-tone, a lighter mid-tone, your lighter colors until your highlights, and kind of build it up from darkest to lightest. But for me, when I did the watercolor, I think you guys saw that I added a very light green to the whole back, and then I started adding like my mid-tones, and then I added my super really dark areas, and then I layered up kind of like a darker mid-tone over everything to create another shadow. And for me, it's just easier for my brain to like do the process in that way. So when I started to do the leaves a little bit later, I got a little bit confused, and I think the intensity of how dark the leaves were supposed to be was not the same of what I have it right now, which I really like the lightness and how Wonu doesn't look like he's getting like entirely eaten by the leaves kind of thing, because they're kind of more on the lighter side too. So that's like something I want to keep in mind. I feel like whenever I use gouache, I tend to make things a lot darker anyways, and it might be because when I do watercolor as the first pass, I always do it super light. Like I usually don't commit to making it super dark because I know a lot of it's gonna be covered anyway. But I need to realize that's like the basis of my groundwork, and maybe I should put more time into actually painting with watercolor so that I do know what I'm doing for gouache. Because I posted this on my Instagram stories, and a lot of people were like, oh, if you call this rusty, like I don't know what to call my art. I consider it rusty in terms of like not exactly the finished piece, kind of like a little bit just because application, but I had a hard time mixing colors or getting the right consistency, and oftentimes going back and forth on certain areas. So I felt rusty the fact that I had so many corrections that I needed, which I feel like if I did proper like preparation or just took my time and not trying to, I don't know how to explain it, like just winging it, if that makes sense, like making things a little bit more deliberate for certain parts, it would have probably caused me less of a headache. And sometimes I look back at certain like gouache pieces that I've done in my sketchbooks. I always wondered like how did I paint them, because it's been a struggle painting with gouache lately, which I'm kind of glad. I think I needed the refresh from the other notebook sketchbooks that I've been using. So I was kind of debating whether or not I was going to use the TrickyWagon one or one of my own notebook designs instead. And I have no problems using my notebook, but the amount of pages as well as just the thinner paper, like it's not meant to be a sketchbook. You can totally use it as a sketchbook, but it's definitely suffers a little bit when you use like wet mediums. So using this one definitely kind of helps me bring a little bit of that confidence back, because I don't have to worry about buckling on the other side. I can still, you know, work fairly cleanly, or like the way how I like to work. I feel like when I work in the sketchbook or like the notebook that I made, and I overuse too much water or I paint with gouache, the paper buckles so much that I can't freely paint on it. I think if you saw any of those other sketchbook tours, usually if the paper's been oversaturated with water, I doodle on the back very poorly. I think there's like a rare occasion where I actually committed to doing like maybe a more rendered piece on the back, but for the most part I keep it fairly sketchy, fairly rough, and fairly unfinished, because I know I'm not gonna like it too much because of how much buckling. I love smooth paper so much. So yeah, in terms of this sketchbook, I am currently working on the backside page of this page. So basically page 2 and 3 I'm working on. I'm just doing a little bit of experimenting, checking how, I guess I posted a little bit earlier of the little Wanu doodle with the watercolor. So I'm just seeing how the watercolor layers up, as well as like how much water I should use on the paper before it does get a little bit unruly and very bumpy. But yeah, so for the hair, I think I settled on what it is right now. As you can see, I don't really like the scattering light effect that I did for it, but it kind of works and it kind of doesn't. But for the most part, I think also the collar, I lost a lot of that really cute kind of scattering light on his collar and kind of on his vest, and I covered it, and then I tried to make new splotches, but they looked all unnatural, or unnatural instead. So it looked very like man-made, very much like circles and stuff, so I didn't really like it. One part I really do like though, if you look on the tie and on his vest, more specifically on the right side, like right side of the page, there's kind of like the warm tones, cool tones, and like darker shadows and stuff. I left it very painterly there instead, just because whenever I'm painting like white or black areas, it's fun to mix around colors. So I was just kind of mixing, I think, the skin tone with the black that I mixed, and then I mixed a little bit of the purple with the same black, and kind of like shifted the hue a little bit, added a little bit of blue to shift it to be a little bit cooler if I wanted a shadow. And now I'm preparing the page for the darker leaves. So I mixed a fairly dark kind of green color. I didn't realize how transparent this was, so I tried my best to layer it up quite a bit and trying to change the consistency of the paint if I could. But I think the patchiness kind of goes away once I added more layers. But even when I build up the layers of leaves, the consistency of my gouache is still a little bit transparent, or like the way I paint still reveals like the brush strokes. So it's not the cleanest in terms of if you want like actual solid color, but for the most part I like the painting. I'm actually glad that I did that for the first page, because I feel like I would have disliked it otherwise if I chose any other concept, or if I made something too extravagant. I think the one I did of Akemi sitting in the clouds, I had no idea what I wanted to for the backside. This one I actually do have a little bit of an idea, but I'll keep that in the back of my brain for now and see if I end up doing it, because I might change my mind. So in terms of the leaves, I'm checking right now, or at least like looking at the footage. So I had the dark green. I had more of a warmer green on top of that, kind of doing like a little bit more detailing, but still not standing out too much. And then I have this more mid-tone green, which is kind of like the base of everything. And then I'll go, I think, a little bit lighter again for the leaves. The way that I saw people paint leaves, they're so beautifully done. I need to do like an actual proper study of them. And I want to do this like both for gouache painting and digitally. I think if I commit to it digitally, it'll make more sense when I paint it traditionally, but I do want to figure out how to paint it to be a little bit more natural looking rather than super artificial, because you can see like a lot of the leaves look very similar. They point in the same directions, and like if you see leaves in real life, obviously there's like a lot of overlap. They don't face all the same direction, therefore making like a weird kind of texture or like a sequence of pattern. So I think that's like, it's hard for me because I feel like I always default to pattern rather than trying to make things, you know, a little bit more natural looking. So I think that's pretty much for the gouache session. I do add some white leaves here and there, or kind of like lighter yellowish white leaves here and there just to flow in. And then as things are drying, I decided to get rid of the hello, and I decided to do it in alcohol markers. So I used a pale green. I don't remember what this one is called. It's probably like not jade green. It's something like, maybe it is jade green. It's one of the others. It's one of the lighter greens. And then I was trying to pick and find a gray to do kind of a little reflection. I did this in a different, I think it's the one that says game over. I had a reflection on that one too, and it looked really cute. So I wanted to do the same. And I kept the hello very faint so that Wonu and the leaves can stand out on the right side, so I don't have things competing on the right and the left. So that is what I've done. Did a little bit of dry brushing for the highlights. You can see the texture of the paint kind of cracked for some places that had thicker application. But this is pretty much it. This is the front page or front cover-ish, inside cover of the, like, this particular sketchbook, if this makes sense. But yeah, hopefully you guys enjoyed another painting session from me. I'm gonna see if I can paint more in the sketchbook, because I have the thicker paper available, so we'll see. I might do more watercolor as well in here. But hope you guys enjoyed today's video. I'll take off these binder clips and we can close the sketchbook, and I'll talk to you guys next time. Bye!